For about a year now, I've wanted to create a series of videos where I break down the processes that I use to produce music. Now that I finished the bridge, I feel like I'm actually at the right level to create this kind of content and have it be useful. My plan for this is to go over every major technique that I use and my understanding of them. In effect, this will build a practical guide to audio production as opposed to a technical one, as I'm not a trained audio engineer and I can't really go into the details on how or why things work. Instead, I will mainly be talking about how and why I make certain decisions during production to get the sound that I want. Now, if you've never recorded a song before and don't know where to start, these videos will hopefully help you start producing your own demos. If you're already recording your own music, I can get you to a standard of medium fidelity, which is what I consider my own output to be. If you want professional quality music, you're either going to have to go to a professional or go to school and start investing because you'll need tens of thousands of dollars in equipment. That's not really the point of the series. It's for people like me who want to be in control of their music and recreate the way it sounds in your head. Now, one caveat is I am a black metal musician, and the examples I use will draw from my own project, in particular my latest release, The Bridge. So there are certain things that may seem unconventional to the trained producer. To add to that, within black metal, I have my own tastes and preferences that are somewhat unique, as with all people. But for the most part, the concepts I'm going to discuss are fairly general and should apply to all types of music production, at least within the realm of rock music. If it's got a drum kit, guitars, bass, vocals, that's primarily what I work with, and it's the expertise that I've developed over the past 6 years. So how does one get started with audio production? First, you'll have to acquire a Digital Audio Workstation, a DAW or DAW for short. Audacity, which is what most beginners who know nothing about recording, it's the first thing they're going to download. That's not a DAW, it's an audio editor with very rudimentary functionality. In short, it's trash. For an entry-level DAW, I would recommend Reaper, which is what we're looking at here. It's shareware with a 2-month trial, after which you can continue using it, but I would greatly recommend purchasing a license for full functionality. At the higher end, you also have DAWs like Ableton and Pro Tools. I've only used Reaper all these years, so that's the framework within which I'm going to present this information. So right now we're looking at the interface of the newest version of Reaper, which is version 6, which I'm still kind of getting used to. You can even see up here in the top left corner that I'm in evaluation mode. I'm not really sure that this new version adds much more in terms of functionality, so I may end up reverting back to version 5, which I do own a valid license for, and which is what I use to produce the bridge. Anyway, what you're seeing here in motion on this video is this exact audio track for this video being recorded in real time. If I come here to the top and I open a new project tab, I can demo a couple of things like adding a new track using the shortcut Control-T, arming a track for recording. If I were to hit this big red record button, it would look just like what we have over here. And we can also do things like add effects and plugins. What I'm going to load here is a VST called MT Power Drum Kit, which is the open source drum sampler that I use. I want to start this series talking about drums because I firmly believe that they provide the foundation upon which rock and heavy metal music is composed. A riff is not a riff until you have a drum track underneath, and that can really make or break a great song. So before I even record a single bit of music, the first thing that I do is make sure that I have the right drum sound. So now that this plugin is loaded here, you'll see that nothing is really happening. If I click on the graphics here, I can play the different parts of the kit. But really, to use this in full effect, it needs a MIDI track. That I will pull from a different program that's just as important to me as the DAW. It's Guitar Pro. I compose all of my music in Guitar Pro because I'm a visual-oriented person, so I need to be able to see my music to really write at my maximum level. It's also nice to have a permanent record of these songs. I mean, right now I can probably play most of this by memory, even though it's 53 minutes long and thousands of bars. As you can see, we go up to about bar 1687. But a couple years from now, that probably won't be the case. So it's nice to have a Guitar Pro track that I can reference down the road. The most important thing Guitar Pro provides me is a MIDI track of the drums. I have open here is the file for the bridge, so you can see rhythm guitars, drums, acoustic, clean guitars, solos, and so on. So once I reach the point where I decide that I'm finished writing a song, I can begin the recording process first by exporting this as a MIDI file. After that, I can hop back into Reaper. I can open a new project tab, and then I can insert a media file. In this case, I would open the bridge. So I'm going to click OK a few times, and you'll see that it's going to load the MIDI track in all of its glory. But the one track, or the only track that I need out of all this, is the one labeled percussion. So now here, let me go into the effects again and load Empty Power Drum Kit. Now if I go into some random part of the song and I play it, you can hear or if I skip somewhere here, so now say I don't like the way this plugin sounds by default. I can go into the built-in mixer and start changing the levels. Say I want my kick drum to be louder, right? Let's go to a section with double kicks. I want to make my crash cymbals louder and maybe bring my hi-hat down or my ride down. So I can do all that stuff. Okay, but what if that's not enough? What if I want to go and modify it more? Well, I can drop an EQ effect. I'll talk about the details of that more in depth in a later video, but for now, I'm just gonna use the EQ to deepen the low end of the kick drum. Now it's loud, so I'm gonna bring the track down. But there's only one problem. When I do that, it's also EQing the cymbals and the snare and everything else at the same time in a way that's undesirable. So this is my practical solution for this. I'm going to take this track and I'm going to duplicate it. Not once, but actually twice. The first track I'm going to go ahead and rename to kick toms, because I want the kick drum and the toms to have a deep booming sound. I want it EQ'd one way. The second track I will call snare. There's a certain way that I like that to sound. And then the last track I will call cymbals. And so what I can do now is for each track, I can go back into that mixer and just turn down everything else that I don't want. So in the kick and the toms, I can turn off the snare and all the cymbals. Over to the snare, I can turn off everything except for the snare and the side stick. And then on the cymbal track, I can go into the mixer and turn off the toms, the kick drum, and the snares. So in effect, what I've done is I've isolated these components that I want to have a distinct sound. And I've created, or I've sorted my drum tracks in a way that I can EQ each component separately to get the exact sound that I want. I solo the kick toms track, and let's say I go to a section with double kicks. We can hear just the drums going. Now I can add the snare or isolate it if I want. And I can drop the cymbals on top. Or isolate the cymbals and have it all play together. But normally I like to start with the bass drum. Now when it comes to EQing a drum, I come from the Fenris school of production. That is, a bass drum should sound like a bass drum. Since I play black metal, the most important sections are these double bass and blast beats. So I'm gonna stick to working in this section. So if I go into my equalizer and I play the track, we can see both the processed and the unprocessed sound. So the processed is the solid yellow line, the unprocessed is the opaque line below it. So if I isolate the bass drum and I let it play out, you can see visually the frequency spectrum of the entire track. Now you can see two peaks here. One at the 50 to about 100 hertz range. That is the body of the kick drum. That's what I really want to amplify here. And you can see as I drop the EQ effect, the sound of this double bass is so much thicker. This is about where I like to boost my kick drum track. Now if I reset that and I play, you see the second peak up here around the 5K range. That is the click of the pedal hitting the drum head. Now if I boost that, right, and I scoop out this bass, Then you hear that clicky sound, which is stereotypical of, well, bad metal. Now I have my theories on why people do this, which I'll summarize near the end of this entire series once I've gone over more of these production techniques in detail and can talk about how it all comes together. But right now, I just want to prepare my drums for recording. So if there's one takeaway from this video, it's that you should not boost this, and you should instead boost this region. This is about how I like my drums to sound. Maybe not so much on the 100, and maybe deepen it around and peak it at 50. Beautiful. Now let's go and work on that snare. Again, according to Fenriz, snare drums sounded best in the 70s, before Phil Collins, hair metal, and arena rock gave us the abomination known as gated reverb, and before Lars went and did whatever the hell he did on Saint Anger. The sound that I have as a reference, the one that I want to achieve, is that of John Bonham, the greatest of all time. And specifically, I'm thinking about the snare in the song Kashmir. Now, to not get copyright struck for this video, I'm not going to play the song, but I already know that John Bonham's snare is a bit higher in frequency than the one that comes in this program. This one, you can see it naturally peaks around 200 to 300. I'm actually going to bump it up around the 500 range and close down the other end to about 1,000. So if I turn the effect on and off, you'll hear what the difference that made is. Off, on, off, and on. This gets me close to what I hear on the song Kashmir, and it's about where I EQ'd my snare for the bridge as well. Finally, we can get onto the cymbals. Now, I generally don't really care that much about how my cymbals sound. Really, the only thing I'm gonna do, aside from the volume leveling, which I think is important, I do like my crash to be loud, and I do like my hi-hat to be a little bit softer. But as far as EQ goes, pretty much all I'm going to do is bring down this very high end here. There's a little bit of a hissing, sound that is not totally desirable. You can also get rid of like all the stuff in the low end, which kind of just muffles your track. I'll go more into detail about this when I actually talk about how to use EQ. But now that I've dropped these different effects on the 3 different tracks, bring it all together and see what we've got. So on that blast beat, you can hear that thick booming bass and also that bright snare. If we open all these tracks and turn off the EQ just so we can compare to what it sounded like before. Not a lot of oomph or power from that kick track until I turn the EQ on. And now that's just hammering in your head. We can brighten up that snare like I did before. Help it stand out a little bit more, and then whatever minor effect I did on the cymbals. That's the starting point I like to have. This is pretty much where I was when I began recording the bridge, and for now it's good enough. There's no sense in spending too much time on the drums alone because the track's gonna sound different once everything comes together. You're really gonna wait until you have everything layered on top of each other before you start fine-tuning things. So you wanna have your guitar riffs, your leads, your bass, your vocals, and you wanna work on all these tracks iteratively and gradually until it all converges to the final sound you want. There are also a lot of other effects that I put on, like the snare and the kick drums, like compression and reverb, that I'm gonna save for later. But as far as just getting started with audio production, this is where I would set things up. The rest of the series, I'm gonna pull up the mix for the bridge itself and use that as the example, as opposed to doing it all from scratch. In the next video, I'm gonna get more into detail with the effect that I did use the most today, which is equalization, or as I've called it already, EQ for short.